Hello, welcome to the Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter. Today we're outside enjoying the summer solstice, appreciating nature, the longest day of the year, and we're going to continue our discussion with feminism. And I would like to make a controversial statement, as if feminism wasn't controversial enough. But I would like to express my opinion that feminism is one of the few examples today of philosophy put into constructive practice. When somebody asks, like, what's the benefit of philosophy in today's world? Like, why should somebody be involved with philosophy? How is philosophy being used today to benefit society? And I would point them toward the direction of feminism, which is a modern ideology. I know a lot of people would disagree with that statement, but I recently read this book. It's called Feminism and the Mastery of Nature. It's by Val Plumwood, and I think she makes a really good argument for that statement that I just said. Plumwood talks about how feminism really is a mirror. It's a critique on society that is expressing an even bigger problem. And that bigger problem is how people in general, how we separate ourselves from us and they, or even us and then other. We put all our focus on one group of people, and then everything else, any other different kinds of culture, race, gender, even sex, we classify them on a subconscious level even, but oftentimes consciously, as just another. We put them as separate, and that really hinders human progress. Let's explore this message, shall we? And we'll do that via reading some quotes, which, I love doing, right? Logic has had a worse reputation than most other disciplines among feminists. It is seen as a sphere of unlimited abstraction and contest for mastery of the other. But such indiscriminate condemnations, as in the case of science, discount the diversity of practices and theories. They also hide rather than expose the politics of reason by obscuring the extent to which the selection of particular practices and types of theories has operated to support hierarchical and phallocentric worldviews. Logic appears as a monolith not only in feminists, but also in popular thought. There is just one logic, one way to order the world, and that one is classical logic. Since this suits the prevailing power relations in logic as well as in the world generally, this view is rarely corrected. But as in other areas of knowledge, there are competing and contested accounts of reason and corresponding of logical systems. Selection from among them is made in accordance with the principles of theory, selection used in other areas, and is influenced by the same sort of social relations. Philosophy has fallen victim to serving a select few people. We would like to think that philosophy is pure, it is independent of things like politics or social issues, and it's more just about the ideas and the concepts. But in reality, philosophy is used to promote a reality that focuses on one group of people and excludes others, just like other ideologies like religion or even things like science. Bear with me as I continue. A healthy feminist identity, like a healthy personal identity, needs to maintain a good balance between self-criticism and self-affirmation. In the same way, critical reconstruction requires the balancing of conflicting imperatives towards redefinition and revaluing. Critical reconstruction must take account of the way gender identity is imbued with power. It must confront the feminist version of the paradox of power. If feminine character and feminine values are shaped in subordination, how can they become in turn socially valued or socially dominant and still retain their character? So what's being said here is that, first of all, we always got to think critically. We can't just accept a reality just because it's kind of convenient, right? We tend to, I feel, in the world of philosophy, we like to romanticize philosophy a little bit. We try to think that philosophy is independent of social problems, and ideas are abstracted in such a way that we can solve problems in a more easier way. But the reality is, a lot of that classical philosophy, like Plato and Descartes and Kant, they were all developed within the context of a particular society. And they were developed by people that belonged to the socially economic higher class. So it is the case that classical philosophy tends to favor people of that class at the expense of people outside that class. And we gotta be very critical of this. Now, I might be losing you at this point, but keep listening. Here's another quote. Nature in the West is instrumentalized as a mere means to human ends via the application of a moral dualism that treats humans as the only proper objects of moral consideration and defines the rest as part of the sphere of expediency. Instrumentalized and unimportant background to civilized human life, they are merely the setting or stage on which what is really important, the drama of human life and culture, is played out. I remember I got a YouTube comment on one of my videos about environmentalism, I believe it was, and the person said in a comment, look, you know what the problem with environmentalism is? The problem is that environmentalists put the concerns of the environment over the concerns of humanity, right? They favor the needs of the environment and they cast away the needs of human beings. That's the problem with environmentalism. This is what this person was saying. And I think that speaks to what Plumwood is talking about, where it's like, that's kind of an illogical statement in my opinion, because the needs of the environment are also complementary to the needs of humanity. Certainly, there are some things that nature needs that are different to the specifics of what this human species needs. That's true. But also, humanity lives in nature. Like, nature is our environment. So by helping the environment, you help the environment of humanity. So in turn, you do help human beings. So the issue is that we separate ourselves from nature. We put nature as this other, where in reality, nature is interconnected with us. A lot of the needs of nature are also the needs of human beings. And we oftentimes fail to realize this. So when we do things that are negatively affect nature, we also in turn negatively affect humanity. And this is what happens when you do this othering, right? This us and then the other, right? And then you put all your focus on us and you don't concern yourself with the other. And there's this mentality that develops where it's like, okay, we need to figure out a way for the other, that whatever we put in the background, to serve our purposes. But what about their purposes? But what about their issues and concerns and needs? When you shortchange what you put in the background, you're also shortchanging yourself. Listen to this quote. The society, as a slave society, depended crucially on war, not just for self-defense, but continuation of the means of production, or at least the slave part of it. The life of the master, his ability to lead a life above slavish necessity, depended on war. It is no coincidence that war is a central organizing principle in Plato's thought, and it is closely associated with reason. The city of reason is structured so as to maximize not one, but two variables, which might normally be seen as incompatible, but which for Plato are perfectly harmonious, indeed inseparable. These are the maximization of reason and the maximization of the ability to wage war. The Platonic otherworldly identity is a solution to this problem. It provides a strong form of continuity and locus of meaning in a way which is consistent with the need to promote the death over life, to promote control by an elite identified with logos and devaluation of the lower social orders as lacking logos, and to model the whole in terms of the social relations of the master to inferior orders. Here, Plumwood is criticizing ancient Greek philosophy, particularly Plato. Now, I'm a fan of Plato. I've done a few videos on Plato. I'm planning to do more. His philosophy can be used for very positive, constructive benefit. That's true. However, I do agree with her argument. She's saying that Greek society at that time there was a lot of slavery and there was a lot of war, and that needed to be justified. Is slavery correct? Is war something that we should be doing? Why should people die in these wars, right? Plumwood argues that Greek society used Plato's philosophy as a way to justify a lot of this by focusing on ideals, where it's like you should serve your master if you're a slave, because if you do that, you will become a more rational person. Or you should die for these wars because ultimately what you're living for are these ideals, these goals, these abstractions. That's what's really important. In a way, we see this today too, where people are fighting for, people are dying for ideals or concepts. When people put so much emphasis and aggression towards abstractions, really, and we're not really focusing on the interpersonal relationships that we have with each other. We're rather just focusing on abstract ideals. In Cartesianism, as in early rationalism, the excluded and the inferiorized contrast of pure thought includes much more than the feminine. It contrasts now include not only animality in the body itself, but also material reality, practical activity, change, the emotions, sympathy, and subjectivity. These features are drawn together in the new concept of objectivity, interpreted oppositionally as pure thought. Objectivity involves setting aside all distractions and passions which obscure thinking. So Plumwood argues that Descartes even took it even further, where it wasn't even about the particular concepts or ideals anymore. It was just about the thought itself. Descartes, I think, therefore I am. The ultimate reality in Descartes' mind was thought itself, not just what is being rationalized, but rationality, period, or logic, period, where rationality is the only thing that matters. Rationality is God, and everything else is subordinate to that. The material world, nature, those are just distractions to what's really important, which is abstract thought. So Plumwood is arguing that classic philosophy was used by society to instrumentalize nature and particular groups of people, like women or other races of people other than people of European descent, things like that. Classic philosophy was used as a tool to justify the pursuit of only a certain class of people at the expense of everybody else. The view of the self as a closed system only accidentally involved in relationships with others and of the ultimate desires of the individual as self-contained gives a misleading picture of the world which omits or impoverishes the most significant dimension of social experience. We can give a much better account of social life by treating individuals as having interdependent interests and needs, which make essential and not merely accidental or contingent reference to those of others. And then she quotes Jean Grimshaw. The human self is embedded in a network of relationships with others, both at very immediate and intimate and at wider levels. Human needs and interests arise in a context of relationships with other people, and human needs for relationships with other people cannot be understood as merely instrumental to isolable individual ends. For all these reasons, it is right to reject an individualistic account of the human self. If by that is meant that the doctrines of abstract individualism or psychological egoism are the notion that the interests of each human being are sharply separable from those of other people, are untenable. Basically, what's being said here is that the whole idea that, people pick themselves up by their own bootstraps is not real. Like, we're all interconnected, right? And what benefits certain people also benefits yourself. And the interconnectedness between people is complex, and it's very difficult to determine it. There could be benefits from one group that on the surface you don't seem to have anything to do with you, but in reality also benefit you as well, because that's how complex reality is, where there's all these different groups of people and different systems and different networks that are coming into play, and they're all benefiting each other. I mean, there is a field of study of this, and that's called ecology, right? The study of all the systems of nature and how they interconnect with each other. So to think that it's all about one particular group or one particular individual, that's really what's mostly important, that is a false reality. To obtain a more adequate account than that offered by mainstream ethics and deep ecology, it seems that we must move towards the sort of ethics much feminist theory has suggested, which can allow for both continuity and difference, and for ties to nature which are expressive for a rich variety of relationships of care, kinship, and friendship, rather than towards increasing abstraction and detachment from relationships. Rationalist-inspired ethical concepts are highly ethnocentric and cannot account adequately for the views of many indigenous peoples. The attempted application of these rationalist concepts to their moral life tends to lead to the view that they lack a real ethical framework. Alternative, virtue-based concepts such as care, respect, gratitude, sensitivity, reverence, and friendship seem more applicable. So we need to focus on how we other certain groups of people or certain aspects of reality. And we need to focus on how we instrumentalize things and people for our own needs. Because when you instrumentalize things like nature or a certain group of people to achieve your own individual aspirations at the expense of what you're instrumentalizing, when you don't allow those you're instrumentalizing to achieve their goals and their needs as well, then everybody gets hurt. Nobody wins. So it is also about kinship and friendship and relationships. That's very important. That's just as important as abstract thought. So what happens when we focus too heavily on abstraction, right? And ideals, just for ideals' sake, and we instrumentalize nature or certain groups of people for particular ideals that are only relevant to one particular group but not relevant to everybody else. I leave you with this long final quote. Through instrumentalism and incorporation, the dominant culture comes to frame its conceptual approach to the sustaining other entirely in terms of its own needs, treating it as an infinitely manipulable and inexhaustible resource. Instrumentalization and homogenization, with their assumptions of intersubstitutability, prevent the master rationality from recognizing in biospheric nature a unique, non-tradable, irreplaceable other on which all life on the planet depends. It has not fully come to terms with Earth and existence, but clings to illusions of identity outside nature. The master rationality is unable to grasp its peril. After much destruction, mastery will fail, because the master denies dependency on the sustaining other. He misunderstands the conditions of his own existence and lacks sensitivity to limits and to the ultimate points of earthen resistance. The master's denial of dependency in his self deception with respect to the conditions of his own life carry grave dangers, which include, of course, self-destruction. Since he is set on course of devouring the other who sustains him, the story must end, either with the death of the other on whom he relies, and therefore with his own death, or with the abandonment of mastery, his failure and transformation. If rationality is to have any function for long-term survival, it must, as ecologists have been telling us, find a form which encourages sensitivity to the conditions under which we exist on the earth, one which recognizes and accommodates the denied relationships of dependencies and enables us to acknowledge our debt to the sustaining others of the earth. Again, we have to be very critical. We have to apply critical thinking. We need to understand that philosophy, just like any other ideology, religion, even science, can be used as tools in the wrong direction. We have to understand that we're all interconnected and nobody should be instrumentalized or just serve the purposes of achieving somebody else's needs without first considering the needs of the other person. And that goes from people, and it also goes to nature as well. Nature has its needs too, and by helping nature out, we also help out ourselves, because nature is our environment, right? You know the old saying, women are the backbone of men. That's an instrumentalization of women, that they need to serve the purposes of man. And that's just a classic example of the way society instrumentalizes a particular group of people to only serve the purposes of another group of people. And that is holding human progress back. Again, this is real feminism, in my opinion. Check this out. Ecofeminism. Feminism and the Mastery of Nature by Plumwood. Val. Sorry, mispronunciations may have happened. You've been watching The Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.